You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
Hey everybody, it's Brian Burns and welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. Hey, it's getting that time, that critical time during the quarter where forecasting is a critical issue because all of a sudden next month the deals better close or people are in trouble. So I got my buddy Brian Burke back on the show today. We're going to be talking about it, going to weave in some war stories that are both funny, entertaining, and lessons hard-earned. This episode was inspired by Pipe Drive's blog. I'm telling you, you got to have the right tools for the job in sales. And if you say, well, my company's got this CRM thing. Yeah, but the focus. Pretty much the number one thing that's coming out from the great sales reps that I'm talking to is focus. You know, once you have the skill, once you've been doing it long enough that you understand about how to talk to the other person and what they care about, focus on outcomes, what I'm hearing constantly is that laser focus on the deals that will close and being able to get the resources you need to have them close. Make them close is maybe a little too strong. I'm going to sum up at the end kind of my lessons about forecasting. It's a critical part of the job. If you do it right, you get the right amount of leeway. If you do it wrong, what happens is you get too much scrutiny and all of a sudden kind of the overhead, the management doesn't know what to do and all of a sudden inserts themselves into your deals at inopportune times, and it goes from a team-based sale to I'm taking this over sale. Make sure you're also checking out nudge.ai, their team approach to using relationships to get into accounts. I remember when we had a startup, what we would do was just send around a list of accounts and we would just get our network to find us somebody who was at that account. Today, it's all done with AI. All you have to do is have everybody on your team using nudge.ai. Just go to their site, schedule the demo for you and your manager and the other members of your team. Tell them Brian sent you from the podcast, and they'll give you the best deal out there. Here we go with my buddy Brian Burke. Hey, Brian, welcome back to the show. Hey, today let's talk about forecasting. This is something that Pipe Drive's been writing a lot about. They did a great blog post on it, on the elements of it. And I've always found that there's kind of two sides of it. There's the management side of it, where they want to project up the organization, you know, the deals that are going to close, when they're going to close, and how big they are. And then as a rep, you kind of got to forecast to see how much you're going to get paid and what you should focus on, and the signals that you should be looking for and prepared for, and the things that you need to prevent. What's your experience been?
Well, the latter. Yes, I've as a senior manager, it's always important to have accurate numbers to pass upstream and sometimes to reflect to Wall Street. But as a rep, we're trying to manage a pipeline with multiple clients and multiple deals at the same time, and to capture it as accurately as possible, and to make sure that I haven't left any step unaccounted for, so that I don't get down to 3/4 of the way into the sales year and find out that, I was supposed to talk to a couple of purchasing people and get a check off to close this deal, and I haven't done that. So knowing the steps in the forecast is critical.
Yeah, and I think clearly we typically have happy ears. We typically send in a proposal and we assume it's just going to slide right through the organization. And depending on the size and the sign-off of the managers, that typically doesn't happen. And we often find that is no decision, but what ends up happening is that there's no justification for the actual purchase. There's no reason that the managers are going to move forward. There's no ROI. There's no justification. The outcome and the implementation dates really haven't been looked at or thought about. and people are just kind of overly optimistic about it, and we underestimate the number of people that are going to get involved in this.
Right. And that may be because after an initial meeting, the customer is excited about what you're talking about or what the company's talking about and saying, yeah, I really need this. I need this. And you want to move forward. And of course, you're excited because you're the salesperson. You communicate that excitement to your boss. But as you're saying, if you miss an understanding of the customer environment or the fiscal year date or any of these other elements, the deal's not going to happen or it's going to slow down. You can correct it, but it might slow it down.
Yeah. And typically, we don't understand all the steps, and we really even may not have even gotten the technical sale where we've proven to the customer that the product does what they want, and we are both optimistic because we're typically dealing with end users of the product and not the business owners of the problem. And
isn't that great? That's a great point, because as you're saying, we're talking to the end users, and there are other perhaps technical influencers that say, hey, yeah, that's great that this end user wants this, and they may even have a departmental budget, but I have other considerations, much broader considerations.
Yeah, and we have to talk with those people, and it's not easy to gain access, and I think we have to prepare for that to happen. That the typical thing that I see with almost all my clients is they go in or they do a presentation online and everybody's happy and excited and they ask for a proposal. And that the worst thing you can do is give it to them.
Right.
Because once they have it, then what do? You follow up, you forecast it for 30 days. You have an expiration date at the last day of the quarter or the month, like every other vendor. And there's no next step. There's no real due diligence. There's no business justification or approval or insight into what their legal process is. Where does this fit in the stack or priorities of what they want to do? And you might find out that, oh, yeah, we're going to do this next year. And then you're like,
right.
Well,
so you're following your own enthusiasm and maybe even the client's enthusiasm, but you may not have all the data, and you're running down a rabbit hole that isn't going to come to fruition because you didn't follow all the steps that perhaps you normally follow.
Yeah. And what you want to do is slow it down, know what has to take place, know that there is a business sale, know that there is a complete technical sale. Because what they may do is just take your quote and compare it against your competitor's quote and go with the lowest price and not understand the full issues. And you're losing opportunity to have influence and some involvement. Maybe control is too strong of a word, but the ability to get involved in that decision on their side.
Right. In a hurry to get to the deal, we have perhaps skipped over a few steps and perhaps lost our ability to effectively compete, and somebody else could come in and who's more thorough and get the deal.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, if the next competitor comes in and they say, well, what kind of price did you get? Well, we'll knock 5 points off of that if you go with us now, and you're losing kind of engagement with that, the account. You're not building a coach or what I call a crime and partner, a partner in crime, where you're open and honest about what's going on, what needs to be done, what your managers care about, what will excite them, how do they make decisions, where does this fit in the priority list, all of this stuff. And it's just you think it's rookie issues, but I talk to a lot of people who've been doing it for 30 years and they still do the same thing. And it's like every time I hear, oh, I like a proposal, and it's like, yeah, let's sit down and work through that. And it's like, what's the outcome you want? When's the deadline? And And once you start getting into that, and then if you give it to, what if I give this to you, I mark it as draft, and I say, well, I give a real short deadline, and you get agreement before you send it, and then you get an agreement to talk about it at a future time, so that you can get control and a sense of exactly what's going to go on.
And you just brought up an excellent point, many excellent points, but one point you brought up was you have to put a time limit on your quote. I mean, because everybody's making assumptions along the way. I'm assuming certain technical details, certain financial health of the company. I'm assuming that this person is a decision maker and will stay a decision maker. So you have to put a time limit on this quote that you're talking about, and you better hope that you captured enough information and knowledge about what the impact that this is going to have on the organization so that it can sail through the process.
Yeah. And when you do that time thing, typically people give 30, 90 days, and that's the worst thing you can do. The best thing you could do is like, well, how long is this going to take? And put conditions on it that, we'll throw in a free day of consulting, or we'll give 5 points off, or we'll guarantee you this, or something. And, they're all going to give you an optimistic date. Put that on there, because then you hold them to it, and it forces them, because that's too fast. And people underestimate the purchasing approval that managers have. And, having done, anything from tiny deals to huge deals, what a huge deal I did with this application service provider is one of the largest ones. Here, me and my CEO were sitting in the office with the CEO of the company the last day of the quarter at 9 p.m. And he's going, I better call a couple members of the board before I sign this. And we both looked at each other like, oh my God. I thought we were, can you get any higher than the CEO? Like, apparently you can.
Well, right. And sometimes customers, as you know, use that end of quarter to twist to get conditions that are more favorable to them. And other times you have less organized people with smaller deals that just forget certain steps, because you're not the only salesperson they're dealing with. So, they're juggling a number of other activities, just like you're juggling a number of sales opportunities. So it behooves everybody to have the most accurate information about where this is in the process. Do I have all the information for this person I'm across the desk from, so that we can transact this right now? And if not, what do I need to do to get to a transaction?
And now let's take that we've been talking mostly about the process, but let's talk about the forecast, because what do? There's two sides of it, right? Because we have to forecast enough business to keep our managers happy. And we have to, if we do too much, then we're going to disappoint, and people are going to be upset. And then there's the pipeline of like next quarter and the quarter after that, which is a lot easier to do, because you get the typical companies want to see 3 times the pipe as your quota. So, and we both worked at a company that, that was all manufactured and believed all from the very bottom all the way to the top. And you're not really sure why anyone even played that game, but that part has to be played.
Right. There's some companies, as you mentioned, the standard that I've seen, just like you have seen, like, well, we want to see 3x your quota in the pipeline. And then there are other companies that for some reason will say, no, I want to see 5x of your quota in the pipeline. So you'll go through the CRM that you have. And let's face it, if you're a new rep in a new territory, it's extremely difficult to come up with 5x your pipeline with credible information. So it really depends on the situation, but everybody's looking to fulfill what they need to fulfill, and we do the best we can to do that with accurate information.
And it's obviously, you get the person who's either put on a plan or been told, this is your last quarter, and they always go to the quarterly business review and they put up, $1 or $2 million deals. It's pretty much their way of saying, please keep me another 90 days. And it's so transparent. And then you get, on the other hand, the sandbagger who will, not tell anybody about any of the deals. And, my point here is anticipate it's going to take longer. Anticipate the deal's going to come in smaller than you think it's going to be. And if you can manage that expectation well with your manager, that's helpful. And it depends on your manager. If your manager is a value add person that you have good rapport with, that can help you with deals, then the openness is great. But if you have a manager who's going to end run you and call into the account or, pull some shenanigans around you and muck up the deal, you have to be conscious of that as well.
Right. You have to, in that case, you're going to have to do a lot on your own. And I hate to say this, but maybe not be as transparent, because you are trying to protect the pipeline for your pocketbook and also for the company. But sometimes there are some managers, as we both know, that are out there, and they get overly eager and they jump right into your deals. And sometimes that delays the deals transacting, and sometimes it kills them. And I think we've both had that.
Yeah, well, they get desperate, right? Because the only person more desperate than a salesperson at the end of the quarter is a manager. Because the manager knows that their lifeline is not that long. If things are going great, they're fine. But if they're behind their number, they may do things that they would not normally do. And I've experienced it. I had a deal. It was in procurement. I had very good control over it. And my manager didn't believe me and went and called somebody at the account that wasn't really involved but had a big title and mucked it up. And, then all the people in the account that were involved started calling me saying, who's this person? And I go, well, he's my manager. What happened? Oh, he was calling around trying to understand where this thing was. And he started calling people that just aren't even involved in this project. And when you get that, then that it just mucks up the deal. So, if you properly forecast it relative to the current context that you're in, you're much better off, so that you can kind of bring in the deals. And I always had this saying, I go, people love to be surprised. They hate to be disappointed.
Right. And as you said before, having a good rapport with your manager and having a good rapport with a technical manager, if there's a technical manager involved in the sale as well, is critical. And as they see you accomplish sales along the way and they watch you progress, then they'll have more confidence and be less willing to just jump in and let you take the reins and run with it, because you're a professional.
Yeah, and I think even when you have your weekly reviews with your manager, you got to be prepared for the classic questions. It's okay, now where exactly is this? And if you say, well, I sent the proposal, and then they're going to say, well, who did you send it to? I sent it to, Joe the developer. Well, your manager's going to say, well, Joe developer's sign off is what? 0. So send it.
He's just an influencer.
He's an influencer. And Joe developer is going to send it to Mike the manager. Mike the manager's sign off is probably $5,000. or
Right.
your expense report. You know, or are they then going to say it to, Harry, the VP, who has probably got a 50K sign-off rate. And so you got to understand it really has to go pretty high in the organization as the dollar amounts go. Like the one with even at the CEO level, it was over $2 million deal. We were literally the last day of the quarter. It was a make or break deal for the company in the eyes of the investors. And of course, you got to understand, managers are not always great sandbaggers either. Some of them are, talking to the CEO, oh yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And if you disappoint people,
That's the worst.
right. You surprise people like you. I mean,
They're looking for dependability. They're looking for a dependable forecast. Does Brian deliver what he says he's going to deliver? That's what every sales organization's looking for. Otherwise, what am I looking at in this forecast?
And dependability is impossible. It's like predicting the weather, right? I can be right 9 out of 10 times, but once in a while, it's going to snow in August, right? And you look at the weatherman, you go, hey, what the hell? And so you're better off, saying there's a chance of it snowing in August, but not a high chance. But you're better off surprising, not too much, And I guess I probably had a reputation as a sandbagger just because I liked control over my deals. I liked not having to sit through, deal review after deal review. And I literally would have a manager call me at 9 a.m, asking me about the status. And before the end of the call go, is there any update on that deal? I go, I haven't been off the phone yet. How can there be an update on the deal?
Well, again, if as a rep, we have a reputation for accurately forecasting and explaining, hey, this is where the deal is in the cycle. This is what could go wrong. This is how we could speed it up. If I had additional resources, perhaps, or perhaps an executive visit, these are some things that they may ask at an executive visit, like they may arm twist for additional discounts or terms and conditions. But being able to just like that, be able to explain those things to management is what differentiates a good from a bad salesperson.
Yeah, and I had a great manager who once said, "Hey, if it's going to go down, don't go down alone." What he meant by that is, if you feel like the deal's going to go south, bring us in, because you don't want to be the only person, because victory has 1,000 fathers and failure is an orphan. It's always been that way. When a big deal comes in, and you want to give credit when a big deal comes in, and if you lose a deal, you want to make sure that all the people that are going to be pointing fingers have their fingers touching that deal, so that you're not the one that they all go, oh, that's the guy who lost the deal. And I think being cautious with your forecast, because most salespeople are not. Most people are way too optimistic. And, when I was a manager, I always like, oh, God, there's no way on earth this is even a deal, never mind this month. For it to close this month, it's got to be in procurement. And,
exactly.
Yeah. And when you try and explain that to people, it's just hard. And even as you go up the org, I'd see managers just pass up the reps forecast up the org. They go, no, I would scrub my reps forecast and make it much more accurate, and put some surprises in there, remove any disappointments, and let it flow up. And I'd rather take the pain at the beginning or in the middle of the quarter than at the end of the quarter, because you
Right,
know
'cause
what happens.
that's when everybody's expecting it to come in, and if it doesn't, as you said before, then a lot of fingers get pointed. And how come you didn't know about this? We don't like those kind of surprises.
You know what happens. You have a bad quarter. The next month of the next quarter is spent doing account reviews, planning sessions, everything that's going to reduce the likelihood of you selling that quarter.
Right. All of those activities that you just mentioned that are trying to explain what happened in the last quarter, now you're taking time, which is our most critical element in sales, is taking time away from how I can kind of make up for that and establish some maybe new opportunities, close things that are in the middle of the next sales cycle for the next quarter, and by doing so, put a smile on people's faces because, hey, I actually delivered.
Yeah, because just count the days. You got 20 days in a month to work, so that you got 60 days in a quarter. If you spend 2 or 3 of them going through a QBR and then doing account analysis and forecasting and updating, you take 5 or 10% of that into no value. It's one thing if you've got a great management team and they're at your beck and call. Unfortunately, that's rare. It's mostly people who are trying to evaluate you and trying to insert themselves into the deal, trying to shortcut the deal based off of their sales experience, which may be all over the map. That they may have never even sold the current product that you're selling. They came in from the outside. So as reps, we've got to own this.
Right. I was working for a very large company, one of the same ones that you worked for, and I remember with that at a fiscal year ending in December. And I remember I was trying to close a big deal that had multiple divisions associated with it. And there was one of the calls was to a decision maker out in Hawaii. So I thought, wow, do I really have to go out there to do this? But yeah, I'll do what I have to do if it makes sense because we need to close this deal. And then what happened was it went up the chain and somebody heard that I was having a sales call in Hawaii, and there were about 2 senior execs that said, no, I'll take that call for him. And because it's December and it's Hawaii. So they get on the plane to go there, and I'm saying to my boss, there's no value add here. They don't even know what I'm working on. So he said, well, put together a brief for them, brief them and all that. So I did. And then when that had happened, I said on Monday or Tuesday, what were the results? What did they say? And I got next to no feedback. It was almost like, they just wanted to shake hands with the execs, and it didn't do anything to further my sale. So, but of course I couldn't interfere with it. So those things happen.
Yeah. I mean, on the inverse of that, I kind of differentiates maybe our styles, but I had a customer, a real qualified customer in Maui. And they were doing a trial.
And you didn't call me for that?
and our policy was both the rep and the engineer went on every trial. And it was in Maui, and I'm in Chicago getting the connection to Maui. And I'm talking to my boss, and he goes, where are you? I go, oh, I'm in O'Hare. He goes, where are you heading to? We're going out to PACCOM or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
He goes, where are they? They're in Maui. He goes, you're going to Maui? And I go, yeah. And he goes, why didn't you tell me? I would have taken that. And I was like, I go, that's why I didn't tell you. Because would he have spent the time on the site the way we did? No,
Right.
And let's face it, it takes a lot of fun out of the trip, when you're working and you really, you pad it a little bit, but you can't pad it that much. But that's just a funny story about how these things work out.
But again, understanding that, hey, this could happen where this executive in this other location might demand, an executive presence, or somebody there to either discuss the financials or technical or some other issue. Again, that can influence your forecast, and you have to know that ahead of time.
Hey, that was a fun conversation and brought up some good stories. But the key lessons that I've learned, and I've become kind of a scientist of forecasting, because I really didn't like people digging into my deals, meaning, diving in, coming in unprepared, coming in with their own agenda, coming in not understanding the political situation and the background, and just trying to get the deal because the company is desperate for the revenue that quarter. These are things that we have to manage. And we have to also understand that our managers really just want the outcome. And their managers want the outcome, and the CEO just wants the outcome, and the investors just want the outcome. And what happens is when they don't get the outcome, they start to put in what they think will work, and it may work, but usually it's a little outdated, it's a little ineffective, and we used to call it a goat rodeo, where people would run around with the chickens with their heads cut off, activity versus accomplishment. And I'm all about accomplishment. Sales is all about accomplishment. The only metric that matters is W-2, 1099. And if you're outside the U.S., that means income. And how you get income is by basically closing deals. For SDR, sales development reps, it's getting meetings, and we got to focus on that. So first of all, a surprise is better than disappointment. Every manager will tell you, I don't like surprises. They love surprises, right? Good surprises. A surprise is good. Everybody likes a surprise, right? A deal comes in bigger. It comes in a day early. They like that, right? They do want to know about it, and you may want to sandbag a little, but what do most sales reps do? Just the opposite. They're bragging about a big deal that's imminent. And what happens? It doesn't come in as big, it doesn't come in as soon, and guess who gets blamed? It's always the sales rep, right? Because victory has 1,000 fathers, and failure is an orphan. Remember that. That's human nature. I put out a video on Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL, and it just talked about extreme ownership. Extreme ownership is what we have to have with our deals, with our time. And forecasting is, in our forecast to ourselves about what we're going to do has to be laser focused, because we got too many distractions today. I've got an upcoming episode on this with Chad. And if you do not laser focus, you're going to get distracted with that little device, that little rectangle in your pocket, with the latest social media, this or that, with BS news and this thing and that thing and some webinar and somebody who's never sold trying to tell you to do it differently. Practice. Look at the science. What I do is I look at the science and I build my art around the science. And that's what I teach in the course. The courses are rocking because the people who embrace it, who take it, apply it, ask for feedback, take feedback, they're all of a sudden getting meetings in companies they never could have before. Why? Because it just works. It's based off of science. This is how people think. This is cold outreach. This is not when somebody calls you and they're looking at you and 5 other people. I get it. You can handle that. You can most likely keep that deal going. But then how do you handle it? That's why you need closing the complex sale. How these deals really work internally. Now, I got a free ebook on b2brevenue.com. Just get on the email list, and it gets sent to you. The link gets sent to you, not the book. So the link is at the very bottom of the email. Just click on it, and you can download it off a box. the PDF. It's a 40-page book. It's a summary of basically how companies make decisions. Now, you have to understand this. It's not about bringing insight. That builds interest. That's useful. That's a skill, right? That's like saying questioning is good, or storytelling's good, or workshopping and whiteboarding. They're all good. I love them all. I do. But they're not the whole game. Play the whole game. No one talks about the whole game because nobody knows the whole game, because nobody's played the whole game. And I had this argument with another podcaster and why I don't have more sales authors on the podcast. And most of them I delete after I've interviewed them because they're total empty suits. They've never sold. Right? They have been blogging for 8 years and they work for a parent or something, but they've never sold. And what they're telling you is, bland goodness. It is goodness. And if you apply it, it's good. But it's not telling you exactly how companies make decisions. And arguing about whether the phone is better than email, it's a stupid argument. Do what works. But you got to understand what works for them. So check out the original blog on pipedrive.com about forecasting. They're putting out great content. Gong's putting out unbelievable content. Discover.org. I'm telling these people, bring out the science and let's talk about it on the podcast. So it's been a great partnership with them. I really appreciate it. Make sure you get the team version of Nudge. Get your manager to just pay for it. There's a free copy of it that's very useful. But once you get your whole team, then you get your whole company, everybody. And all of a sudden, in your pipeline, you can see how everybody's connected. That is how that's the easiest way to get in, is by showing you are already a member of the tribe, just an extended member of the tribe. That's it. Thanks for listening. And I really appreciate everybody who's talking about the podcast, sharing it on LinkedIn and Twitter or wherever you live on social. I'm putting some energy into Facebook. I don't know if that's the right thing to do. I've got an Instagram account. I put a quote out every day. Nobody wants to see what I'm eating or what I'm doing because I'm busy here selling and teaching you and helping you sell more so you make more money this year.